Hey there, hi there, a big shout out to my bros and a bigger shout out to all of their hoes. It is I, Mr. Sean, and this is Chimera Miniatures' official YouTube channel. This is the channel where I, Mr. Sean, entertain all of you in order to pitch my business, Chimera Miniatures, where I make tabletop miniatures, HeroClix miniatures, and of course, not safe for work miniatures. Today we're back with RPG horror stories, including one story from my own history as a dungeon master. If you like these stories, please like, subscribe, comment, and check out the miniatures, maybe even buy one. The more people that buy my miniatures, the more of these videos I get to make. Because of course, this channel is not monetized, I have no Patreon, but I do have lots of titties on minis that you can buy. Now that I'm done with my shameless plug, let's get to the stories. Our first story today comes from Candy Floss Cavalry 666 and is entitled, "He's a Bad Player and a Creep? It's More Likely Than You Think."
Hi there. Long-time lurker, first-time poster. I've been watching a lot of Crispy's Tavern recently, and I thought that it would be cathartic to post here myself. When I was 14, there was this older guy I knew from choir and just general socializing who I'm gonna call Creep. I was talking to him via Instagram just casually. We were on a group chat for queer people from my school and other stuff together. Suddenly, out of the blue, he started hitting on me in private DMs, telling me that he thought I was cute, that it would be fun to meet up over the summer, etc. Until it devolved to straight up propositioning me. Creep was like 17 or 18 at the time, and while for most people this would be a serious red flag, I was in a bad place emotionally at the time, so I was just glad for the attention. Eventually, it devolved even further, when he started sending me nude photos and videos. Then he started asking me to, reciprocate. I kinda noped out of the situation, and the next morning, Creep begged me to delete everything from the DMs, and I did. I assumed at the time that he had just made a stupid mistake, and tried not to make a big deal out of it, because he, like me, had autism. And I thought that he'd just been unable to pick up on my being uncomfortable. When school started up, I was invited to play D&D, specifically Horde of the Dragon Queen, I think, with a group of older kids, 17 to 18 age range, with me just having turned 15, that I mostly knew from theater and whatnot. I was super excited, not only because I would get a chance to actually play D&D, my last campaign involved a guy who named his character Expandong69, and a sequence where one guy had to roll to, not get the mafia boss's daughter pregnant. A nightmare, actually. But also because I would get to hang out with older kids and be treated like an equal. Like I had a seat at the table. I showed up at the session 0 and I knew most of the people there, including Creep. I, at that point, was trying to be cool and be treated on equal footing as these older kids, so I didn't bring it up or even try to distance myself from him. You have to understand that I was trying so hard to be liked. I made a healer, Aelin Greenfeld. Wood Elf Druid, and to this day my favorite character concept. I offered to do art for everyone's character. I brought snacks, something considerably difficult when we weren't allowed off-site during the school day, so there was practically no way I was going to jeopardize my chance of real friendship with these guys over something I considered at the time to be a misunderstanding. Creep, on the other hand, had no such qualms about upsetting the group. He played a wizard. And we didn't even get to the level where he would have been able to cast Fireball, but I have a sneaking suspicion that he would have been the type to go, "I cast Fireball!" in an enclosed room. My evidence? We were fighting a monster. I can't remember which one exactly, but it was difficult enough to be the only enemy for an all-second level party. And our fighter and wild-shaped druid, we had two, including me, were in melee combat, with my pocket supporting them. Our wonderful Creep decided it would be a good idea to cast Burning Hands directly at the monster, with us in the line of fire. We were second-level characters, bearing in mind, and 3d6 damage each completely blindsided us. The other druid was knocked out of wild shape, I was at 1 or 2 hit points, and our fighter had to start making death saves. Our sorcerer had finished off the monster, and I stabilized the fighter. The one time when Spare the Dying came in handy. We started ribbing Creep about his spell choice out of character, but because the other players didn't seem too upset about it, I let it go at the time. Creep was also a little obsessed with my character. His wizard was always flirting with my character, something that I was quite uncomfortable with. especially since although my elven druid was a century old, he was very much younger in demeanor and appearance than Creep's full-grown wizard. I pulled a classic blunder, and tried to fix an out-of-game problem with an in-game solution, giving my character a long-lost lover that he was very committed to. That, of course, did not deter Creep in the slightest, and he gave me every variation of, "Well, he's not here right now," you could possibly imagine. I think that the DM or one of the other players must have noticed how uncomfortable I was and talked to him or something, because one session, he just stopped flirting entirely. In-game, that is. But once again, I was a younger kid desperately trying to fit in with an older crowd, and no way in hell was I going to confront him about it. Then the sessions had to move to Discord because of a certain global situation. I say sessions plural, but we only managed to have one full party session because Creep seemed committed to never having any free time for D&D. Not something I'm particularly faulting him for, I know that scheduling is hard. I'm just griping. During this time, I noticed people getting more and more snappy with Creep in party group chat, which I thought was due to his absence from sessions, but as it turned out, it was about something way worse. I don't blame you if you don't remember me mentioning the group chat for queer kids in our school, but apparently everyone was mad at him because he was sending inappropriate messages to a bunch of boys in the group chat my age or younger. I'm a trans woman, but at the time I didn't know that. As far as I know, he hadn't sent anyone else pictures, but then again, the other kids might not have felt comfortable disclosing. The campaign, understandably, fizzled out soon after I found out about this. No one kicked Creep off of any group chats, so for a while, he would send memes and random messages and everybody would just ignore him. I've tried my best to forget about him. I blocked him on every social media site he was following me on, except Spotify because I can't figure out how to do that on there. And luckily, I didn't really have to see him in person, lockdown and whatnot. But unfortunately, he ended up staying in town for uni, so occasionally I see him in a shop or something, and then haul ass out of there as soon as possible. TLDR, Creepy Guy hits on me and sends inappropriate direct messages. I end up in a D&D group with him, where he ends up being an obnoxious and boundary-crossing player. For the final act, I find out that he's kind of a child predator, and proceeded to just ignore him into oblivion.
Alright guys, apparently we are starting this one off with a banger. I don't know if I fully mentioned it on this channel before, but I grew up having been diagnosed early with ADHD, and later on was diagnosed with Asperger's-like tendencies. What that means is I am not on the autism spectrum, but I can kind of see the spectrum from where I am. Kind of like when in Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy and her crew can see the Emerald City off in the distance, that's kind of where I am, and the Emerald City is the autism spectrum. The one thing that people with things like ADHD or autism will tell you, if they're a good person that is that they don't like to use their condition as an excuse. Except in the situation of super extreme cases, most people with autism know right from wrong. They know if they're being creepy. Yeah, they might not pick up on social cues, but that doesn't mean you don't know right from wrong. I guarantee that Creep in this story was one of those people that used his autism as an excuse for his bad behavior. I kind of figured when this story started and OP said that Creep was like 17 or 18, that OP was probably around the age of 16. But the fact that by the time Creep was 18, OP was only 15, yeah, this guy was a predator. Combine that with the fact that this contact was all made with the group for queer kids at high school, already a marginalized group, a vulnerable group, and Creep was trying to take advantage of young boys in the group. This guy's just a monster. There was very little actual RPG in this RPG horror story, and mostly just horror story. I mean, yeah, the one part about him being one of those guys that goes, "I cast fireball!" My fiance is that kind of a player, and she's actually managed to kill a PC once upon a time in our current campaign because of her insistence on casting fireball, but really most of the problems with this guy happened outside of the game, and I'm glad people just started ignoring him because this guy is probably never going to learn his lesson until he ends up in jail because, "Oh, it's not my fault, I have autism, I have the mind of a child." No, you don't. You know you're a creep, you know you're a predator, leave the boys alone. Our next story comes from Felipe5083, is entitled Problem Player in Fallout Homebrew Game. This happened in 2019 in an online RPG table I was part of. We were playing our own system, Dead simple D100s with advantages over player stats on special system. And this player arrived on our group. Let's call him V. V was a really big fan of anime. Mecha anime, especially. If you're not familiar with Fallout, as a series it has robots and power armor. All of it is somewhat following 1950s fictional robot rules. That is, robots with limited to advanced artificial intelligence, and power armor being merely an exoskeleton suit, but being their own self-contained things. You could technically ride outside one very strong robot, but wear it like a suit wouldn't necessarily happen. V's idea was to wear power armor, but not just any power armor, the most advanced type of suit in lore, many decades before it was created, and use it as an interface suit to ride a sentry bot around like a mecha, immediately making his character the most powerful in-game. Our DM said no immediately, and V bounced around some other ideas, until it landed on something that was fair and not game and lore breaking, like his other ideas. He had a small iBot that served as storage, not bad since it happens in New Vegas, but oh boy, he wasn't happy. He began metagaming, first insulting our characters in his native language, then bragging about his character status as a Chinese agent. He'd use information from other RP sessions where his character wasn't present to get leverage on other characters. Finally, he had enough and decided it was time for a communist revolution in post-war America by attacking our players. Some of us wore power armor, and others were gods of stealth. Long story short, he wasn't able to do anything with his combat rifle and died horribly. He said some curse words, threw a fit demanded to be treated fairly, and then left the group. His character and his ideas became sort of an inside joke in my group. Look, I can't fault V for liking what he likes, even though personally I'd rather watch an anime that was a thinly veiled fan service rather than really dive into a mecha anime, which is my least favorite genre, but you like what you like. But like, ultimately that's the thing, you like what you like, and there are mecha animes out, mecha RPGs out there, so if you wanted to play a mech pilot, why wouldn't you, if you're going to join a random group, why not join one that's playing one of the mech anime RPGs? Also, V is clearly a power gamer, wants to be the most powerful guy on the table, and while that can serve a purpose, like yes, there's always going to be someone in an RPG that is, for whatever reason, whether it's just the situation or whatever, slightly more powerful than the rest of the characters, but that should be something that happens naturally, not because you just want to be the boss among bosses. Like, I don't know if this is an actual RPG that exists, but let's say you were playing an RPG where every character was playing more or less like a Tien, Chaozu, Yamcha level character in a Dragon Ball Z type universe, and you're trying to survive, say, Frieza coming down to Earth and attacking. Well, if one guy decides to make his character Goku, that just kind of ruins everything. Tabletop RPGs are group experiences, and if you're not matching the group's energy, you're not having fun. If you really want to be a one-man army, just play a video game, because power gaming is not going to make you any friends. Our next story comes from Ally Lysothiocchiante and is entitled The Dwarf Who Was Too Short to Look Up. This happened many years ago, way back in the late 1900s, when I was a wee babby mustard green. I played Vampire the Masquerade and Werewolf the Apocalypse a few times with a local friend group. And one day a couple of the people from that group invited me along for a D&D one-shot with another group that they knew. I hadn't met anyone else from this group, and I had never played D&D before. The game was an older edition, not sure which, and spoiler alert, this actually ended up turning me off of D&D for so long that I didn't try to play again until 5e. So, fair warning, I don't remember / never knew some of the details of the game mechanics involved here. I could be totally in the wrong for all I know. Maybe I am the RPG horror story. Anyway, the setting was run-of-the-mill sword and sorcery, Tolkien with the serial numbers filed off. That standard issue fantasy world we all know inside and out. Now, being an idealistic and contrarian young thing and not really understanding some of the things about D&D character optimization, I thought it would be fun to subvert some of those tropes in this world by role-playing a character that had a surprising or atypical class and skill loadout for their species.
And I was upfront about this with the DM and other players, so I ended up trying to build a Dwarven Ranger whose main offensive technique was archery. The others in the group said I could do it, but warned me that it wouldn't be optimized. And maybe I am the asshole for not taking the hint, but I figured, hey, it's a one-shot, so it's not that serious. I'll take the right stats to be as good an archer as a starting level dwarf can be, and the roleplay flavor will be fun. I was the only one who was new to D&D, so the DM and other players helped me allocate my stats and figure out what skills I would need. And we got started. The other players were a caster of some sort, a cleric, and a couple of melee-based fighting classes I don't remember for sure. I was the only dwarf, as well as the only PC with ranged physical weapons, at least starting out. Typical adventure began. We all popped into existence in a local tavern, whatever the story hook was walked up to us, and we were away! I don't really remember exactly what we were supposed to be doing, saving a noble's daughter or finding a magical artifact or something, but the first leg of our MacGuffin hunt took us to up a rocky path through the mountains and canyons, where we were immediately attacked by pterodactyls. We rolled initiative, a couple of the players got attacks off, and it was my turn. Obviously, I try to shoot one of the pterodactyls with my bow. The DM smirks and says, "Did you take insert skill I'd never heard of and haven't ever heard of since? Let's call it aerial reconnaissance." But again, I don't remember exactly what he called it. I was like, no, what is that? DM explained to me that because dwarves are so short, they're not able to use ranged weapons against targets that are positioned physically above them unless they take this special skill that allows them to. Essentially, look upward.
Yeah, well, Big Al also says dogs can't look up. Think about it.
I said I hadn't seen or been told about that rule and asked to see it, and was accused of arguing back against the DM. I asked why no one had mentioned this while they were helping me build the character, since they all knew I had no experience with the game and was making a dwarven archer, and the session devolved into a lecture on how I should have known about the inherent inflexibility of dwarven cervical bones. I asked if I could at least try to shoot the pterodactyls, even if it wasn't likely to hit. The DM's response? You can try, but I'll tell you now it won't be possible to roll that high, so the only thing that might happen is you'd hit one of your allies. Okay, I said. I watched to see what happens. The rest of the party fought the pterodactyls and we moved on. I tried to engage with the world and story a couple more times, but I was repeatedly shot down or ignored. I ended up spending the entire rest of the game using every turn I had to watch the other players do things that it was arbitrarily ruled that I couldn't do solely because of my character's race. Highlights include, your arms aren't long enough, and you're too heavy to make the jump, so you'll have to find another way around. I couldn't leave because the friends I had come with were my ride, so I just sat through it for hours and hours. No one noticed or cared that I was having a terrible time. I didn't play D&D again for at least a decade. In fact, because I was a wee baby and didn't have the social skills to spot a problem table, I spent a fair amount of time telling other TTRPG players how much I hated D&D because the rules were so restrictive and stupid, and the players were so argumentative and unwelcoming. I gave it another try many years later with friends I trusted, and I came to realize that DM was almost certainly cheesing everything to punish me for my race/class choice. But I was always curious if there actually is, or was in that older edition, some kind of rule about dwarves being too short to look up. I never found it if there is.
OP, it sounds like to me what you were dealing with was a group of players and a DM that are so into optimization that they want to punish anybody who dares try to have fun with this, gasp, a game. The first time I ever played D&D, I had no idea what was going on. I made a dwarf fighter just because I thought it would be somewhat easy, and to be honest, dwarves are an awesome fantasy race. And despite having to more or less ask for help with almost everything I did in that campaign, the players never looked down on me for it, and the DM actually tried to help make sure that my character could be as effective as I possibly could. Like, despite me being kind of that guy like you that could be kind of an asshole, I guess, like, I had a dwarven Urgosh that my code word to turn it into fire was heart, like from fucking Captain Planet. When we were nearing the end of the campaign and we were going to go to a realm where most of the creatures were resistant to fire, my DM actually was like, hey man, you might want to find a different weapon with a different element because they're going to be resistant to your fire Urgosh. So I ended up with a battle axe that could do lightning damage, and its keyword was thunder, thunder, thunder axe, ho! Long story short, the DM was invested in my character being able to be as useful as possible and me having as much fun as possible as a player, and your DM was not invested in this at all. He just wanted to punish you. Now, I am no expert on older versions of D&D, but as far as I knew, there was nothing about dwarven cervical bones. I had to look that up. I thought you were talking about like the cervix. No, it's the neck. But there's nothing about dwarves not being able to look up. They're not like dogs. You just had a piece of shit DM that was mad at you for trying to have fun with the game instead of just being able to play and adapt. Like, I'm sorry, but if your DM knows you love fire spells and then purposely puts you in an area where you can't use them and doesn't give you any type of warning that that's going to be a thing, your DM is shit. Just like if you want to make a ranged dwarf and your DM and the players don't bother to tell you that dwarves have trouble with range, you have shit DM and friends. Also, this is a little off topic, but I can totally understand your comment about how you were basically turned off of D&D for years because you met a bad group and didn't know that it was a bad group. I have a similar situation, not with a TTRPG, but actually with Magic the Gathering. So one time my best bud at the time, who was a big Magic player, decided to bring me along to draft night so that he could pay for my entry and just take any rare cards that I happened to come to, get during the draft. And I had a limited experience with Magic the Gathering. Like, he had made some decks that I had played with, or he'd helped me construct a deck to play against him, but ultimately I really was not good at that game. So basically it was just hanging out with my buddy. He was hanging out with his buddies at the card shop that night, and it was basically known that I was a total noob, and anybody who played against me during that night was going to get a free win. And 2 out of the 3 people I played against, I lost all 3 rounds, don't get me wrong, but 2 of the 3 people I played against, when I went to shake their hand, afterwards, like, hey, good game, like you do at the end of any type of match, they more or less looked at me and said the essentially, I'm not shaking hands with a noob. Like, the fact that I was new and didn't know how the game worked meant that they were absolutely insulted that I would dare show up to Friday Night Magic. And while I know that that is not every card store in the world, to this day, I have a very bad opinion of Magic the Gathering players because that was my experience. There is good and bad in everything, and sadly, because of your early experience being a bad one, I'm sad that it colored against your enjoyment of D&D. I'm glad you apparently finally got back into it, because it is a fun community if you find the right people. Alright guys, our last story of the day comes from my brand new subreddit, r/Mr. Sean Reads Stories. This one is entitled, How My Desire to Be a Good DM Just Made Things a Lot Harder for Me. And if you haven't figured it out, this is my own personal tale from the first time I ever tried to run a campaign of Dungeons & Dragons. So our final story comes from Chimera Miniatures, and it's entitled, How My Desire to Be a Good DM Just Made Things a Lot Harder for Me. About 10 years ago, certain events would occur that would set me on a path towards where I am today. A bad breakup would lead to me losing most of my friends and would also lead to me leaving my hobby of the prior 8 years, HeroClix, and transitioning to various board games that I played with my new friends at our weekly board game night. After watching an episode of Community, said board game group decided that they wanted to try their hand at Dungeons & Dragons. As I was by far the nerdiest in the group, they essentially voluntold me that I would be the de facto dungeon master. Before this, I had played essentially a one-shot of Vampire the Masquerade, tried to run a few games of Mutants and Masterminds, to limited success, played through most of a campaign of D&D 3.5, and 1 session of D&D 5e. I had essentially no clue what I was doing. After seeking help from YouTube and finding Critical Role, I used their first campaign as a way to learn how the game worked, 5e. Please note that I did not expect my group to roleplay to the level that they do in Critical Role, but it did give me a decent understanding of how to apply the mechanics and how the game worked. I decided to make a campaign that borrowed, ripped off, heavily from the plot of my favorite PS1 game, Medieval. It would have the players working to stop a zombie invasion created by a disgruntled court mage. However, I wanted to give the players an easy intro quest that would also give them some level of renown in the area, and bolster their heroic sentiments to encourage them to play the role of big damn heroes to help save the realm from the zombie scourge. As I had been getting back into reading H.P. Lovecraft at the time, I decided to make the intro quest involve them stopping a cult from essentially bringing the King in Yellow into the material plane. This was supposed to be an easy intro quest. The party was expected to succeed. So a thing about me is that while not a perfectionist, I want to give my players the ability to fail or succeed on their own merits. No railroading from this DM. I wanted them to feel like their choices mattered and had an actual effect on the world. As a brand new DM, this was probably too much for me to handle, but what can I say? Due to previous bad experiences from Game Masters, I wanted to do right by my friends. So the story began with the party being summoned to the castle of the local baron. The reason each member was there was ham-fisted at best, but hey, it got the party to the same place. The baron's daughters had gone missing on their way to the capital city. Bandits were suspected, but no clues had yet been found. Essentially, the party needed to make their way from Town 1 to Town 2, then into the forest to find the remains of the caravan. Then the bandits' hideout, then the lair of the cult who had killed the bandits and taken the Baron's daughters. In my head, this was pretty easy and straightforward, but apparently I was wrong. The party immediately started questioning the Baron's staff in a very accusatory manner. Rather than trying to gain info about the world, they essentially yelled at everyone, "Did you do it?" After learning nothing and then setting out to follow the path of the missing caravan, they managed to get themselves arrested no less than 3 times. The act of them getting arrested and then getting themselves released took up a lot of in-game time, to the point where what should have taken them 2 to 3 days to find the bandits' ransacked hideout and a tunnel leading to the cult's subterranean lair took them 7 days. Now, I could have made things easy on myself and just been like, hey, it's cool, just like in a video game, the cult will wait till you get there to start stuff. But no, I had to try and be a good DM. So by the time they made their way through the tunnel, I figured they had about 20 rounds of combat to stop the ritual that was already underway. The ritual was supposed to be super easy to stop. The cultists were channeling their own life force into a magic sphere that would transform the Baron's daughters into the 3 brides of the king. All the party had to do was attack the sphere and it would ruin the ritual, killing the cult members and saving the Baron's daughters. However, the party kept attacking the cultists. Each time they killed one, their life force channeled into the sphere. I tried giving hints, saying each time they did this, the orb glowed even brighter. A simple arcana check would have told them what to do, but no one ever thought to make one. The party's ranger tried to shoot the orb, but rolled a nat 1, and didn't try to shoot it again. So once the time ran out, the ritual succeeded and the 3 daughters were transformed. They fled the area and the party was made aware that the King in Yellow's return had been started. Think the seals breaking in Supernatural. So now that there was a potentially world-ending event taking place, the zombie army plot was scrapped entirely. I had to rework the entire campaign. Ultimately, I did this to myself. The campaign ended up being pretty fun. But take this as a lesson. Just because the solution is easy to you, doesn't mean it is to the party. So yeah guys, there you have it. Even I can be the reason behind an RPG horror story. That's gonna be our video for today. I do so hope you enjoyed these stories today. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you do have the ability to, go to my eBay, purchase a mini, or reach out to me directly, and I can make you a nice custom mini at your request. Please check my links, and if you have a story you'd like to see read on this channel, go to r/Mr. Sean Reads Stories, and it might just show up in a future video. As always, guys, I'm Mr. Sean. This is Chimera Miniatures' official YouTube channel, and I hope you alpha great day and an even beta tomorrow. Bye-bye.